Is squatting knees over toes bad?
Don't you want to look good naked?
In short, no. There's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to squatting with your knees over toes or doing any type of movement, lunges, split squats, things like that, where your knee actually tracks over your toe. This comes back to some bad information that people have gotten over the years where it's like it causes injury and all of that, but it's all dependent on what the specific goal is, right? So I will say one caveat here. If you do have prior knee issues and you notice pain with, your knee moving over your toe too far, then that's gonna be something to assess for you. But for the majority of people, squatting with knees over toes can actually be beneficial, especially if your goal is to emphasize your quads. So when we're focused on squatting with the goal of getting as much output in our quads as possible, it actually makes sense to have your knees go over your toes or push your knees over your toes, because that's going to allow you to get more knee flexion, which is just the bending of your knee. I like to think about it as closing the gap between your calf and your hamstring. So that's gonna be knee flexion. That's going to allow us to bias our quads a lot more in whatever squat we're doing. So whether that is a barbell back squat or a split squat or a squat on a machine. So if your main goal is to bias your quads, you actually want to be squatting and thinking about pushing your knees over your toes as much as possible, because that's going to allow you to close that gap between your calves and your hamstrings, which will then allow you to get more output from your quads as you're flexing and extending your knees. So for example, a few exercises where you may be actually targeting your quads a bit more and wanting to have your knees come over your toes would be a heel elevated barbell back squat, where we're really focusing on actually pushing our knees as far over our toes as possible and closing that gap between our hamstring and calves, or a heel elevated barbell front squat. Other exercises where you may find that your knee over your toe is actually helping you to emphasize your quads would be split squats. So whether that's a front foot elevated split squat or a front heel elevated split squat. Some other exercises could be a cyclist squat, where you have your heels elevated and you're focused on pushing your knees forward and getting as much knee flexion as possible, or a sissy squat. You're gonna get a ton of knee flexion with that, and your knees are definitely gonna go over your toes during a sissy squat, because you're gonna get a lot of lengthening of your quad muscle, which will create lots of stimulus there. So there are a lot of exercises where knees over toes is actually beneficial, because again, it's going to allow you to get a lot more out of that quad stimulus as possible if you're looking to build your quads. Women, we believe